are on India's water sector opportunities and challenges. There are some guidelines that we would like to, some guidelines that I would like to clarify before we start. You can mute and unmute your microphone using the green symbol on your panel. And please raise your hands to ask questions, and questions will be taken up at the end of the presentation. You can post your questions at the bottom of the panel and they'll be answered at the end, or you can raise your hand, we'll unmute you to ask the questions. Today we have Dr. Arunabha Ghosh with us, who is the CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, an independent policy research institution in India. He has conceptualized and has led CEW since its founding in 2010 to the top-ranked climate think tank in India for the last 2 years. He has experience of working in 35 countries and have worked at Princeton, Oxford, UNDP and WTO in Geneva. He has advised government, industry and civil society around the world. He is a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader and a Fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Network. Dr. Ghosh has also advised the PMO, several ministries and international organizations on energy strategy, energy policy, resource nexus, governance, arrangement for water and sanitation, clean energy, climate policy and negotiation, and global governance. We would be, the flow of the presentation would be that I'll be introducing EBTC and our services and discuss various opportunities and strategies, and would give the panel to Dr. Ghosh to take up water and talking about various aspects of policy, regulations and public and private partnerships. The European and Business Technology Center is co-funded by European Union and coordinated by the Euro Chambers. We are the only center dedicated to promoting European clean technologies in India. There are various platforms that we have developed to bring in state-of-the-art clean technology solutions to India, and we do the matchmaking between European technologies and the Indian demand that is available for using these technologies. We also have an IPR help desk to assist in all legal and intellectual property issues, and we have 39 partners in Europe and India that we work with. The EBTC services are throughout the life cycle of a company coming into India. We help in exploring the market, finding the right opportunities, giving market insights to the companies who are interested in exploring the Indian market. We also help in adapting their technologies to the Indian scenario, technology localization, adapting to the local environment, and grow their businesses by various platforms that are available, one of them being the Investors Circle that I'll be talking about in a bit, and incubation space that's been provided to European SMEs to use as Indian offices within EBTC. We have 3 regional offices and a head office in New Delhi. The 3 regional offices are in Kolkata, Mumbai and Bangalore, and the incubation space is available in all 4 of them. They're also in protecting the intellectual property rights of the companies who are looking at technology transfer within India. The 2 of the major platforms of EBTC that I would like to throw some light upon, one is the EBTC Investors Circle, which is a platform to connect global investors with European SMEs interested in the Indian market. This has been launched in February this year, and we already have a set of investors who are on board to explore pitches from various European SMEs. The other platform is the European Technology and Technology Experience Center. It is a dedicated platform for technologies to showcase themselves to in a user-friendly way to Indian entities. We are planning to install many such physical e-techs within research organizations, government organizations, and others to give a hands-on experience to them on different technologies that are available. We receive a lot of inquiries from Indian players who are looking for clean tech opportunities and technologies, and we map them out as project briefs and showcase them on our website. There are about 150 project briefs available on our website as of now. These are real demand-led opportunities identified within the Indian market, and European SMEs can go through them and find the right match for themselves, and we can help them match their technologies with the right users as well. So these are very much opportunities that can be tapped immediately, and hence are something that we look at updating very regularly. Some of the market entry strategies that we've identified over the years are local manufacturing in a joint venture, technology transfer and licensing, as licensing even establishes a legal framework for technology transfer, exporting through local distributor, and some market insights here as well, which includes that India is a very price competitive and a sensitive market, and thus less profit margins can be compensated by larger volumes. There is no plug and play that would work here. Anything that works in Europe would not exactly work here. You need to adapt your technology to the local surroundings, to the local environment, and thus research and due diligence are very critical in while entering into the Indian market. Just 2-3 visits or 2-3 meetings with anyone and coming into India, that would be the shortest way out of India. So, and we encourage European SMEs to use the network and expertise of EBTC to venture into the Indian market and penetrate deeper into the Indian market. The role of water in the circular economy. As you all know, that there is a lot of importance given to water now, looking at the paradigm shift that the Indian scenario is seeing, looking at water as a resource. And though water has been pushed into a linear model in which the more polluted it becomes successively, it travels through the system, it becomes difficult for it to reuse and revamp itself. This practice transforms our most valuable and universal resource into creating great cost for subsequent users. One of the key aspects of involving water in a circular economy is to look at the goal of a closed loop cycle. All water, including fresh water and grey water, should flow into subsequent cascades where it may be used for another purpose. Thus, recycling and reuse has a greater potential and a lot of resource efficiency that would also be taken into place. Investing in river basin management, in which there should be strategies that promote the vitality of watershed and wetland restoration, also looking at them in a circular economy concept perception. Many communities struggle to cope with low quality sludge and fragmented contaminated streams of organic waste, typical of that produced by households and businesses. there should be a mechanism to extract organic nutrients out of the water stream and utilize it. These are some of water is used as a resource, as in productive input into various industrial and household uses, and thus reaches the water stream, wastewater stream. And tapping the wastewater stream to get your maximum nutrients and treatment of this needs to be done in an optimizable way. The shift to a circular water economy holds much promise. It would replace scarcity with abundance and greatly reduce the resources needed. We must capture this unique opportunity before localized droughts and shortages become a global crisis. So here is some of the initial thoughts on this webinar, and now I would give the floor to Dr. Ghosh.
Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to all of you in Europe. I'm first of all thankful to EBTC for giving me the opportunity to interact with you on this issue of opportunities and challenges of water in India. What I wanted to do for you today is give you first an overview of water in the country, and then talk a little bit about specific sector-specific priorities, and then talk a little bit about the various enablers, whether it's from the policy side or from the private sector side, that can create opportunities. But of course, from business to business, the story might be different. A quick introduction to my organization. I run the Council on Energy, Environment and Water. CEEW is an independent think tank ranked as India's top think tank for the last couple of years. And as you can see, we've engaged with a large number of countries across the world in using our research capability to advise on public policy issues. So, the overview on water. Now, water, of course, is a crucial natural resource, and in India, at least if you look at the overall quantum of water, there does not seem to be a scarcity. We get a fair amount of precipitation, including snowfall, about 4 billion cubic meters, but the actual available use of water is about 1,100 cubic kilometers, of which little over half comes from surface water, the remainder from under the ground. Now, as with many other countries across the globe, irrigation is the main consumer of water. More than 80% goes towards irrigation. What's important to understand is that much of that irrigation water now in India comes from under the ground. So it's groundwater that is irrigating India's agriculture. Irrigation efficiency is not very high. The surface water efficiency is only 50%. Efficiency of groundwater use is about 65 to 70%. So that's well below world-class standards. The other issue is, of course, population growth. And as you can see, that from the time around when India became independent to now, the per capita availability of water has fallen quite a bit, from 5,200 cubic meters per person to about 1,500 cubic meters per person. Just so you know, the benchmark for water stress is when it falls below 1,000 cubic meters per person. And that's the global benchmark, but there would be parts of India that are already affected by it. The other challenge, of course, is the groundwater exploitation. A fifth of groundwater blocks that have been assessed in India have been found to be critical or in an overexploited stage. And the last point is that in terms of urban water usage, which takes up the maximum amount of water after agriculture, there is a significant loss of water, both in terms of technical losses as well as in terms of monetary losses. What is called non-revenue water in urban areas is very high. The average was about 39% for a study of 28 major cities, but in many cases that can be much higher. Now, of course, these challenges can also be considered as opportunities, so it's important to then break down the issues in terms of the sector-specific priorities that would inform how water is governed and managed in India. The most important thing to consider, if you look at this slide, is that in many ways India is in a unique position in the world. Mostly what happens is you have, in terms of economic growth, you have growth in agriculture, which then yields to growth in industry, which then yields to growth in the services sector. Now, in India, the services sector already accounts for 60% of GDP. Meanwhile, the government has plans to increase the share of manufacturing from 15% of GDP to about 25% of GDP. And a majority of the population still lives off the land, so irrigation and agriculture will continue to consume water. So what is unique is that the linear form of economic development is unlikely to take place in India. Actually, what will happen is that the overall quantum of demand will increase for water use, and the competition between sectors will increase. As you can see, even as you go forward into the middle part of the century, the share or the quantum that is required by agriculture still does not come down much, even while the demand in other sectors keeps rising. So in terms of, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about priorities in irrigation, priorities in the urban sector, and priorities in the kind of circular economy, and bring in the industrial water use aspect in it. In terms of irrigation, one of the most important things to understand, and that graphic kind of summarizes this, this is from analysis we did for the erstwhile Indian Planning Commission, which was at the time preparing the 12th five-year plan, which initiated the paradigm shift in water governance in India. And one of the points that we identified was that in many states in India, especially in the north and in the west, the what is called the ultimate irrigation potential has already been reached, and in fact what is being utilized is sometimes more than what is the potential. So you are actually overusing the irrigation assets that are available. And in other states in the east, etc., there's a lot of potential that still needs to be met. But the point is that if you are approaching the potential or exceeding the potential for ultimate irrigation in the country in several parts, especially the major agricultural states, then the real opportunity does not come from adding more supply, it actually comes from improving efficiency of use. And therefore, this has become a major part of the of what is called a national water mission. The national water mission is part of the National Action Plan on Climate Change in India, and we've been supporting the Ministry of Water Resources in looking at this issue of irrigation water efficiency in India. And those pointers that are there are kind of feedback that we got from extensive consultations with all the states across the country and the state governments on what kind of inputs they needed on the institutional side, on capacity building, on technical interventions, and in creating an enabling environment for them to support their own governments and support their irrigation departments in terms of improving irrigation water use efficiency. Just to highlight a few of them, if you look at the institutional reforms, there will be a lot of focus on participatory irrigation management, so directly giving farmer communities a say in controlling and managing the distribution end of the systems, which then in turn creates opportunities for new types of technologies, etc., that farmers can use, both to monitor as well as to manage the water. There will be a lot of demand in capacity building for both the farmers as well as the irrigation departments. There will be a lot of demand in technical interventions, whether it is new types of cropping patterns, whether it is better information collection, or it is better information transmission, or mapping of water resources along with other natural resources. course, the enabling environment will be a function of resources available, financial resources available from the central and state governments. The other issue to keep in mind is the nexus between energy and water. As I mentioned earlier, about a fifth of the groundwater blocks in India are already overexploited or in a critical state. And that graphic shows you that in many states, and mainly major agricultural states, whether it's Punjab, whether it's Haryana, or Rajasthan, you have an overexploitation of the groundwater resources. Now, that's not just a water problem, it's also an energy problem. We've got about 30 million, or just short of 30 million pump sets in India. Two-thirds of those are based on electricity. The last third is based on diesel. So again, there's a lot of opportunity in improving the efficiency of these pump sets to reduce the energy requirements, as well as improving their overall functioning so that the water drawn is in an optimal fashion. The other aspect of water that is going to be challenging from the energy water perspective is the energy is the water demand in the energy sector. So outside of households and agriculture, the maximum amount of water used is in industry, but 95% of the industrial water use is actually in the power sector. And going forward over the next 20 years, much of additional water withdrawals in India will be for the power sector. So again, there are opportunities in monitoring, better technology, better efficiency, and so forth. Then we come to the issue of urban water and sanitation. India does not have a good record. As you can see, over the past decade, between the most recent and the previous census, the availability of drinking water within premises for urban residents has barely gone up by about 5% in one decade. It also means that large numbers of the urban population still are using water from uncovered wells or hand pumps or tube wells and so forth. The story on sanitation is even worse. A majority of Indians overall are actually defecate in the open, but majority of rural Indians, but even in urban India, a large number of urban Indians do not have modern sanitation facilities. And then sanitation, of course, is linked to sewerage, and you can see that a majority of urban households do not have are not connected to closed drainage. Now, again, all of these challenges can be seen as problems, or they can be seen as opportunities. Where there are connections, the availability of water in major urban centers is just about 4 hours on average on a daily basis. Wastewater, and this is the last set of priorities I wanted to highlight. Wastewater, particularly from urban areas, and their link to industrial water use is going to be important. Whereas India generates about 57,000 million liters per day of sewage, it's only 20,000 million liters are treated on a daily basis. So you get a huge amount, a majority of the sewage that is generated is untreated. And that, of course, has an impact on large stretches of many rivers, hundreds of rivers in the country. And the treatment capacity itself is very limited in even the major cities across India. And that graphic on the right-hand side shows you how little treatment capacity exists across the states in India. Now, in response to all of this, let's now come to the last end of my presentation, which is what would be the enablers to take note of these challenges and convert them into opportunities. Enabler number 1 will be, of course, government policy and government initiatives. Before I talk about these government initiatives on the screen, let me just give you a little bit more background on government policy overall. As I was mentioning earlier, when the 12th five-year plan was being written, and we are right now in the middle, bang in the middle of the 12th five-year plan, there was a paradigm shift in how water was to be managed in the country. And this was a consequence of consultations with water users, with water managers, with bureaucrats, with technocrats. And the story there was that there has to be two main thrusts. One on improving efficiency, and the second on improving participatory management of water resources. And that informed a lot of how the latter end of the last government was trying to put in place a new national water policy to take that into account. Now, those ideas have not been, are still very much on the table, but what has happened over the past year that the current government has been in place is that many mission-level initiatives have been initiated which have something or the other to do with water. One of the biggest missions which was announced last year is called Swachh Bharat, or Clean India, and this is a pet project for the Prime Minister. And the idea, of course, is partly to completely end this open defecation and manual scavenging that goes on across the country. But there is also an expectation that improving sanitation and sewerage services in India will give a big role to the private sector. Exactly how that will happen, I will come to that in a second in terms of the challenges and the opportunities there, but I'll come to that in a bit. The allocation has been 1,700 crores, so that's about $300 million. It might not seem too much money, but the expectation is that that kind of money can then leverage additional investment from the private sector. Priya, just let me know when if I'm doing okay on time. Yeah. The other major mission that has been launched is called the National Mission on the Clean Ganga. Now, Ganga is the major river of the country. It is considered both holy as well as its floodplains support nearly 700 million people. So it has an economic role as well. Just to give you an idea about that economic role, the Murray-Darling River in Australia is about the same length as the Ganga, 2,500 odd kilometers long. Australia is the world's driest continent, and therefore the imperative of improving water use efficiency is very high there. So per unit of water, per cubic meter of water in the Murray-Darling, the economic output is 50 times what is the economic output per unit of water in the Ganga. So two rivers, same length, but 50 times more economic output is coming out in Australia as opposed to India. Just demonstrates the extent of economic opportunity that remains to be exploited. Now, the mission for Clean Ganga is more focused on the cleaning up of the Ganga, or the cleaning up of the polluting sources that feed into the Ganga. So nearly a little over $3 billion have been allocated to this project. We should watch this carefully because it's a major project, and at the same time we should watch it cautiously because attempts have been made to clean up the Ganga for the last 30 years. The original Ganga Action Plan began in 1985, and we've not seen much progress. So how this particular new avatar of cleaning up the Ganga will take shape will be a consequence of not just the financial resources allocated, but also the way in which the private sector participation is brought in at both ends, at the polluting end as well as the cleanup end. Unless the two do each other, it's very difficult to execute. Amrut and smart cities. They're both related to cities. Amrut relates to existing cities. Smart cities relates to new. The idea is to improve urban services across the board, whether it's transportation or water or electricity. Particularly on water, the idea for Amrut is that every household would have access to tap water and a sewerage connection. I had mentioned earlier the big gap between this ambition and the reality currently. But a huge amount of money has been allocated. Basically, it's 50,000 crores, so that is over $8 billion. But when you look at the number of cities that are meant to be targeted, that's 500. So you're basically 100 crore. That's just over, I would say, about $15 million per city. So again, not that much money, but the expectation is that it would help to attract foreign investment or domestic private investment to leverage more funding. The Smart Cities initiative is for greenfield sites. 100 smart cities are being planned, and again, the ballpark budgetary allocation is similar to the Amrut mission. But as you can see, that because there are 100 cities as opposed to the 500 under Amrut, the city-wise allocation will be much more, to the order of about $80 million per city. The Prime Minister has stressed the need for foreign direct investment in all of these missions, and then the question then is, what would be that role that would be played? So let me now come to, I will skip this particular slide and just come to the kind of decisions that any investor would have to make in terms of where is the best point of intervention. India has thousands of sub-basins, but on 6 major river systems, a few dozen river basins, and so forth. The question is, where do you begin to target? Do you target at the basin level, or at a state level, or a district level, or at a city level? The big issue in all of this will be the data that is available on the ground. In her introductory remarks, Priya was talking about the need to make many visits to India before investing with your eyes open. The other point I would say is that whether it's 1 visit or 10 visits, make sure you're generating or going away with more data than you came in with. The more data that you have, the better it would be to prepare an appropriate business plan. So let me just give you a few other of the enablers that will guide the new opportunities in the water sector. The private sector, of course, will have a big role to play, and these are findings that we've had from extensive consultations with the private sector, as well as with water utility managers, as well as with the non-governmental organizations, as well as with government officials. Number one expectation is that the private sector will help to bring in money that will be needed for the infrastructure, the hard infrastructure development. The second big expectation is on the technology side. The more you can innovate, again, as Priya was saying, it's not a plug-and-play economy. So the more you can innovate your technologies to fit into the Indian conditions, I gave you many examples where the technology would be needed, the better is the market opportunity for you. The third is going to be on the soft infrastructure side, the capacity building side, because unless the water managers and the officials that are dealing with this are comfortable about the technology or the new governance, the management practices, they will oppose any kind of investment. So the hard and the soft infrastructure has to go together. That is the only way to succeed in India's infrastructure sectors, whether it's water or anything else. Another area where the private sector will have an important role will be in the asset management. We have very poor databases of existing water assets, whether it's the hard infrastructure side, the pipelines, the treatment systems, etc. And the better, and if private sector can bring in its management practices, monitoring practices to improve asset management, then even before the bigger investments in additional infrastructure have to be made, there will be opportunities to exploit this more lower-hanging fruit. There will be other issues which might not come, which might not seem intuitive to a foreign investor, but they will have a role in the Indian political economy. One of them is the community awareness. As with dealing with the public sector water managers, it will be equally important to deal with raising the community awareness for urban residents in particular. Unless that happens, the willingness to pay for improved water services will not come through, and there are dangers of how the investments can go belly up. Similarly, there's always the government always welcomes any kind of investment that helps to build up the scientific research within the country. So if you are wishing to make in India, if you can also innovate in India, that's the cherry on the cake. And finally, there will be the role to play in terms of improving the disclosure of water use within industry and helping industry monitor how much water it is using and establish benchmarks for improving water use within industry, as well as in improving the efficiency of services of private water vendors. Now, if those are all the roles of the private sector, what has been, what will be the priorities in terms of improved public-private participation in India? It is recognized now increasingly that PPPs are a necessity, but it's not going to happen just by signing a contract. The historical experience of PPPs in India has been a mixed one. So when we analyzed what succeeds and what fails, some of the things to keep in mind is understanding the scope of the problem, and this is why I talked about getting better and better data, whether you're operating within a locality in a city or within a state or at the national level. It doesn't matter. The more data you have, the better it is for you to shape your contract in more specific terms. A proper time frame is very important, and unless those pre-feasibility studies are done, the rush to get a contract signed has often resulted in poor investments made in many cases. You have to also look at designing unique contracts. There have often been calls for a common contractual template, but within the political economy of the country, and especially at the state level, that has been difficult to come about. And therefore, you've got to recognize that there will be contractual modifications based on the state, its available resources, its priorities, etc. So even while some basic contractual templates might be there, there will be fair amount of sort of sui generis designing as well. The financial framework is where the issue becomes fairly important to consider. Number one issue, of course, is your revenue stream and who is supposed to be giving you funds. Is it the final water user, or is it a water utility, or is it another government agency? Clarity on that is going to be extremely important to create an appropriate financial framework. But one thing is guaranteed, that upfront funding is unlikely to come from the users. It will be the willingness to pay will be based on the improvement in service performance. And then finally, one thing to keep in mind is that there will be, again in the Indian political economy, there will be several other stakeholders that have to be taken into account, or whose views have to be taken into account to make your investments sustainable. The other issue is finally on the issue of how wastewater from the urban users can be used through a circular economy pathway into industrial water use. In India, industrial water use constitutes currently a very small portion of overall water use, and as I said, most of that, 95% of that, goes to the power sector or electricity generation. But as manufacturing increases, It's not the issue of whether overall there is a problem or not with water use in industry. The competition and the tensions over water use in industry arises depending on the location of the industry. If the industry is located in a water stressed area, it does not matter how little it is using, it becomes a kind of a point of contention. And how do you deal with that, therefore, is to try and both improve the efficiency of water use that's coming from, say, municipal water sources. In some states, such as in Tamil Nadu in India, municipal water is no longer delivered to industry in many cases. But there is also, therefore, the opportunity to bring in technology and financial opportunities to reuse wastewater and treat it and use it in industry. Whether there are already some small cases across the country, but there are many other technological opportunities in sewage treatment plants for using the treated water for horticulture and fodder crops, for improving fertilizer production, using the biosolids from the treatment systems, generating energy from the sludge that is generated. So basically, there is to be a mindset change in using the wastewater from urban areas and making it a resource for industry or value-added agriculture. The last point I wanted to make is about the broader set of actors that are going to kind of inform the political economy of water management on the ground. And this is what we call as collective action. And we've studied several cases across the country where industry, government, civil society are sometimes in tension with each other and sometimes acting together. And we find that the three important factors that result in any kind of success is better communication and coordination, improved monitoring and accountability, and recognition that there are clear threats or opportunities in how the water resources being used. All of this points, therefore, back to the point I made earlier about data. The better you are at collecting data, analyzing it, monitoring performance, and feeding that back into the users as well as the regulators, the better it is to create opportunity in the water sector in India. So let me stop there. Those are just some of the publications of ours related to water, but I'm happy to answer any questions that might have arisen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ghosh, for that very detailed and a lot of informative material we received from you on this. A lot of good market insights. I would now, we are now open to take up questions if there are any. You can raise your hands or type in your questions at the bottom of the page.
Hello? Unmuted. Hello?
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yes?
Hello?
Hello?
Are you getting my voice?
Yes, we are.
My question is it the right time to enter into wastewater management by our company? We are from CMI Industry, Bombay.
Yes.
Should I go ahead and answer that? Yes. I think in terms of, if you ask me as a general question, is this the right time to enter into wastewater treatment, and especially from a circular economy perspective? Yes, it is. If you ask me where will that opportunity arise, or which state, you're based in Maharashtra, for instance, as you very well know, parts of Maharashtra have severe water problems. And I have held meetings with Maharashtra, with bureaucrats in Maharashtra dealing with water, as well as industry in Maharashtra, and there is a clear need for efficiency within industry, as well as to try and find additional sources of water that don't compete with the water that is being used in agriculture, especially in the water-stressed areas. Now, the question then arises whether the state has created an appropriate enabling condition for water use, water reuse, and that is something that is undergoing in Maharashtra. I know several people within the government are interested in this area. The International Finance Corporation is already working with the government there. So I think Maharashtra or Tamil Nadu or Rajasthan would certainly be states where you should begin to explore your opportunities.
Hello?
Yes, I hope
Hello?
you have a question. Hello? Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Yes, thank you for the answer.
You're welcome. And we'll be taking a couple of more questions, though we have received a lot of them. We'll take the first two questions, please. What are the key environmental challenges you foresee from increasing use of desalination and other water treatment systems?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. And the main issue is when these water treatment systems are brought in, what do you do with the kind of waste that is left behind? You end up with treated water, and then you end up with, in some cases, toxic waste. And that is again going to be affected by two things. One is a potential demand for that waste. As I was mentioning earlier, biosludge, etc., can be used for purposes of fertilizer generation or for energy generation. But the waste that is completely unusable will be regulated by the control board. So again, the states will have to outline how that waste will be disposed. And how it will be monitored. So that will be certainly an issue that you should consider, whether the waste generated will have alternative uses that you can find a market for. Get this copy of the slides. Yeah, I can share the slides. Yes, yes, the slides will be shared. Many of the questions are asking if the slides will be shared. The answer is yes. What would I take away from the session is that there is need to secure water needs, but also for others. There is a very important question that has come up, or rather a comment that has come up, which is about the need to improve water security assessment at a project conceiving stage, ensuring the water is available for all stakeholders. And the question is, can I throw a typical light a light on a typical framework for this? There are at least two ways in which this can be done. Number one is water resource mapping, and this is again where technology comes in. There is, to just give you a very simple example, the ratio of water monitoring devices to groundwater extraction devices in India is 1:500. Means for every 500 groundwater wells of various kinds, there's only one of them has a monitoring device. It just highlights how little even our baseline information is in terms of understanding the resource pattern in a particular area. And the more you can get a better sense of that, say using sonar technology to understand groundwater levels, or understand consumption patterns in a particular area, the better it would be. The other way in which this can be done is more at a macro level. It might not be appropriate for individual industries, but it's something that we've been doing. In fact, I released a document on that at the Bombay Stock Exchange earlier this week on the risks that water faces from climate change. And that is something that many parts of India obviously is going to be fairly stressed. And that kind of a risk assessment has to be done on a continual basis because both the flood events, the drought events, and the overall precipitation patterns are going to change fairly dramatically going forward. And those kinds of, if you have technologies, models, etc., to improve that assessment, state governments might be interested in it. But for now, I would say the first approach of just monitoring and assessing the water use available today and mapping it will be the way to go.
Okay. There is a question from Dr. Jagannatha Rao. I'm going to unmute Dr. Jagannatha. You can ask the question, please.
Sir, Bangalore is full of has a lot of lakes, and
yes.
The wastewater from the gutter water is being diverted to that, the excuse that all the lakes are dying, which is causing a lot of pollution. Not only that, that water is being given to crops, and like sugarcane and vegetable production, etc., in rural areas, which is not very conducive. And I feel that it is high time we told the administrators not to do this and instead try to only use rainwater.
I think you make a very important point, Dr. Rao. Actually, you make two important points. One is that the reuse of treated water or untreated water for irrigation purposes is something that will be contingent on how confident the farmers are about the ability to use that water for their particular crops. This is related to the earlier question also that was raised about the waste, etc., that is generated from water treatment. So just because it's not for human consumption doesn't mean any kind of water can be put into the fields. And the more we do that, whether explicitly or surreptitiously, the bigger will be the backlash from farmers. The second point you're making is about rainwater. And again, this is something that will vary from city to city. For instance, in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu, the government had introduced a very strict regulation insisting that all households have to install rainwater harvesting structures on the threat that if they did not do that, their sewerage lines would be cut off. So it was kind of a sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. And one way or the other, the government did manage to enforce this to a large extent. Now, Bangalore has not done that in terms of a compulsory requirement, but whether it's Bangalore, whether it is Delhi in the north, it is very important to encourage rainwater harvesting and at the same time improve, the last point is improve rainwater catchment areas for farmers. The ability for small tanks, ponds, canals, and check dams to store locally available rainwater is significant, and it is an opportunity that remains fairly unexploited in India. Only parts of India have begun to do this in a big way, but India is still largely in its agricultural sector a rain-fed economy. And unless those small check dams, etc., are built, it would be very hard to, again, improve or get the willingness of the farmers to either pay for water or release or let go of water for other sectors. So again, it often comes back to the overall political economy of competition for water across sectors.
Okay. The next question is from Keith Hayes. Keith Hayes, you can speak now.
Yes, hello. Thank you. Very interesting presentation. I was just looking for more detail on the PPP comments you made. Are there any examples of operational PPPs or projects in the pipeline that could be seen as a model for growing that market more going forward? Thank you.
Yes. The short answer is yes, there are models. I would encourage you to go to our website and read the document called Urban Water and Sanitation in India. That gives you examples of existing or past PPP models that have succeeded in India, as well as those that have failed in India. It's important to learn both from the successes and the failures. And that will give you an idea of why there have been failures or why there have been successes. More recently, so as I was mentioning earlier in my presentation, there have been PPPs have had a mixed record in India. The earlier part of the last decade, there was a lot of backlash. Now there is more acceptance that the role of the private sector is going to be fairly important. The other recognition that again came out when we did our work for the Planning Commission was that already in urban India, many water-related services are actually already delivered by private service providers, even though they are not called PPP. So the water is still managed by a public utility, but everything from maintenance, billing, metering, all of that is often outsourced to private entities. Now those are again lower-hanging fruits. The big controversy, what still remains, is the extent of upfront investment that the private sector is often expected to make for the purpose of improving the hard infrastructure. And that is where the controversy lies, because governments insist that that is indeed the role of the private sector insists that often their role is improving efficiency and the big money needs to come from government. The solutions, of course, vary from case to case. In Karnataka, again, as we were talking about earlier, in northern Karnataka, there are 3 cities that have been experimenting with 24/7 water provision through the private sector. In parts of Delhi, long-term contracts have been signed for that purpose. In Nagpur, in Maharashtra, again, long-term contracts have been signed for private sector water provision on a 24/7 basis. So there are existing ongoing examples, there are past examples, and I would encourage you to look at that document that gives you much more detail.
Okay, we are running short of time, so we'll take one last question from Micheline Groove, and then the rest of the questions will be answered by Priya by email, or she'll personally connect with you all for the other questions raised. So Micheline, I'll unmute you and you can voice your question. Yeah, Micheline Groove?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I'm working at the Flemish government, and also I'm an independent consultant in wastewater treatment and environmental sciences. So my question was, is there already an overview about which data are available? Is there already a good regional analysis with this data, and is there already a priority plan set up for every region where all the different stakeholders can work together for working out their action plans?
The answer to the first question is that I would recommend you to read the National Water Resources Framework Study, which is also available on our website. I was the lead author of that study, and that gives you as up-to-date as possible the data that we had until 2 years ago on various kinds of water use, etc. In India. More recently, there have been, as I was mentioning, there have been discussions between the central government and various state governments of how to implement the National Water Mission. Unfortunately, the plans that were being developed at the time was towards the end of the last government, So after the new government came in last year, some of those state-specific plans have not yet been finalized, so they kind of remain in limbo. Meanwhile, these national missions have been launched on Ganga, on Clean India, and on the cities that I highlighted. So I would recommend that going forward, you use the existing database and then connect with the cities along the Ganga that are being considered, as well as the cities that are, there are 3 cities, for instance, that are kicking off the Smart Cities initiative in Andhra Pradesh and in some other parts of the country. So those might be your tactically the better points of entry to see how your technologies can be best utilized in those areas of opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ghosh, for taking out time to be a speaker at this webinar. And thank you everyone for joining in and participating in this. We will be getting back to you with the presentations and other documents related to this webinar. Thank you so much, everyone.